Hey loves, let's sit on down. Let's sit on down. Oh my gosh, I am so excited to see you again here in your home for another episode of the Hardened Healed Podcast. Now, today is Tuesday and it was supposed to be out Monday. And y'all, please forgive me. I had an event this weekend and it was phenomenal. It turned out great. But unfortunately, I did not get to tape for this episode prior to because I've been doing all the runaround. But no excuses, just an explanation. But don't worry, next week we're going to be back on our regular scheduled time, which is 6 p.m. on Mondays. So thank you so much for your patience and returning. I know y'all probably were like, what happened on yesterday? It will not happen again. Trust me. But I'm back and I'm here so that we can tap into getting on the other side. We know what the other side is. That is the heal side. So I am London, your healologist. I am here to prescribe whatever it takes to take care of your emotional trauma, usually childhood trauma. And so what we do here on this podcast is make certain that not only do we identify with our triggers, but we come to some sort of aha moment so that we can move forward and not be a victim of childhood trauma. Now, how do we do that? Well, first, by taking our assessment test. So if you have not seen any episodes before now, I encourage you to do so. There are plenty for you to choose from. But at the end of every episode, there is in the description bar 5 different assessment tests that you can take. They are all free. You can take one, you can take them all. And the most that they require is your email address. So if you're not, against giving that up, it is well worth it. The options are you're either a secured attachment style person. If you're not secure, then you're one of 3. You're either, why do I want to say disorganized? Disorganized or fearful avoidant. Those both are the same things. Or you are dismissive avoidant, or you are an anxious style attachment person. Now, why is this important? Well, because it's a game changer. This is how you handle your loved ones. This is how you handle your partners. This is how you handle your peers, your work, your community, church. This is how you interact with other people based on what not your love language is, but what your emotional awareness is. And a lot of us are not aware of what our emotional mentality is, right? We talk about mental um, illness. We talk about mental illness all the time, and we are now making that a thing so that people are not afraid to say, mentally I'm challenged. Mentally I'm going through some things. I'm having a breakdown. I don't see things as well or as healthy as I should. Well, that goes for emotional as well. As light as we take it, our emotional state of being is so pivotal, is so vital, it is so important to the health of the relationships that we are in. And when we're not well balanced, neither is that relationship. And sometimes we can turn a good person away. So that is the whole purpose for this podcast. But I'm going to give you a second to go ahead and take your assessment test. You could do it now or you can do it later, but go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Now that we got that all together, and you've already hit that subscribe button, of course, let's just jump right on into it. So, a few weeks ago, a few episodes ago, we were talking about the conversations that we should be having once we find out what our behavioral type is in relationships and what that sounds like and how to explain that to your partner so that they can deal with you a little bit differently as you grow and mature in this knowledge, because the whole goal is not to stay there. You don't want to stay anxious, you don't want to stay dismissive, and you don't want to stay disorganized or fearful. You want to be able to be secure and have a healthy relationship. So now that we've spoken about boundaries that we set with others, we really need to talk to ourselves. There are boundaries that we need to be setting for ourselves. We know our triggers better than anybody else, right? So we have to be able to identify it and say, this person is going to bring that out of me. This person makes me feel a way. Why? What is it that they say or do? Because a lot of times it's not really that the person is unhealthy or toxic or a bad person. It's just that some of their behaviors do not go well with our own, especially the ones that we're trying to mature from and grow from. So, first off, once you have identified what your attachment style is, now it's time to identify the triggers. When you identify the triggers, you have to identify the situations that bring on those triggers, who those people are, what those situations are, and what way would you like to now respond to that? And it doesn't happen overnight, but once you become conscientious of it, it becomes a learned behavior. You learn to not be so easily moved, so easily upset, so clingy, so detached, so irritable, so anxious. Like these things are learned behaviors that you can unlearn. I don't know if they told you, but you don't have to stay in any of those particular attachment styles other than secure. Secure, healed, that's the journey that we're on. That's what we're trying to get to. So you have to now look at the situations that you come in contact with, whether you bring them on yourself or whether you just have a hard time avoiding it. So there's totally a difference. There are times when we step into things and we add fuel to an already existing fire. And then there's sometimes where we see a fire and we take it upon ourselves to go and try to put it out. Now, these things are great if we are in a stable and secure and healthy emotional state, but it is awful if we are not. So rather than try to cram all the different attachment styles together, we're going to just start with one. So let's just start with anxious. So if you are an anxious style attachment person and you now are identifying what your triggers are, if you haven't, now is the time to do so. Now is the time to pair up and think about how you interact with your partner. If you have a partner, if you don't have a partner and you're dating, how are you operating in your dating life? Are you coming on too strong? Are you setting expectations but folding when you feel like you're going to lose the person? Because these boundaries are very, very important. If you create them and you don't stand by them, nobody else will. So when you have certain expectations when you are dating, whether that be I want a guy that's well groomed every time I see him, I want a guy that's mannerable, I want a guy who is chivalrous, I want a guy who compliments me. Now, these things may seem very minor to some people, but it can be very major for an anxious style attachment person. A compliment may go extremely long way because that is something that an anxious style of person has lacked. They have not received that. They have not had that. Maybe not on a consistent basis. Maybe not from the people who really matter. Because we also have to realize that you could be complimented by anybody, but the compliment holds more weight when it's around or by someone who you value a lot. Right? So a stranger in the street can tell you, oh my gosh, you have such a beautiful smile. And you say thank you because you've heard it before or you happen to agree. But then your significant other just goes, baby, I love to see you smile. See, you was getting all warm and fuzzy just now when I said that. And that doesn't even have to be, you don't even have to be an anxious style attachment person for that to feel good. But I'm saying these things to say when we know what we need to stand by those things. Some things are going to be more important. Maybe you don't have to hear it, but maybe you need to feel it. Maybe you need a hug throughout the day. Maybe you need your significant other to be more affectionate. It's so crazy how sometimes we say the opposites attract, yet we get opposite of us, and it's like the clash of the titans, right? The more love you want, the less love they want to give. The more happy you are, the more upset they seem to be. It's like this yin and this yang. And so when we say opposites attract, we want it to be on the positive level. We want to be attracted to and attracted by someone who has our other good thing, right? So if I'm the good cook, maybe you're the good cleaner. If I'm the good driver, maybe you're the good organizer. Like that kind of opposite, not where we have nothing in common, where we're not compatible. That is a little bit different, and that's not what we're trying to venture on. So when we are creating these boundaries and we now know our triggers, because think about it, when people go dating, they say, oh, well, what you're looking for in a person. We look for the likes, the things that we like, the things that we love. But what we don't think about is the triggers. How is this person going to trigger the part of me that is trying to heal? That takes dating to a whole nother level, because now you have a different itinerary. It's not so much what you can do, but what you can't do. These are my, how they say, non-negotiables. But a lot of times we don't know that non-negotiables directly tie into triggers. So while I might not want to negotiate between 5'6" and 6 feet, I may decide 6 feet is non-negotiable, or taller than me is non-negotiable. 5'4" or 5'2" is just not going to work. That's not a trigger, right? That is just a preference. So having a preference and having a trigger is two different things. Now, someone who yells or uses a lot of profanity when they're angry, that could potentially be a trigger. I need somebody that's a little bit more cool and calm, somebody who might want to walk away, digress, and then come by and address the situation. You have to know these things about yourself, because if you don't, when these things happen in advance, you're like in a whirlwind, because now you're head over heels and you really like the person, but like they do all the things that you hate. So knowing your triggers are very important to dating, to marriage, even parenting, right? We all sometimes have that one child or all of the kids, and they blow our whistle, they ring our bell, and we respond aggressively or negatively because they've hit a trigger. But when you identify with your trigger, you now are able to have a different type of relationship with them, because you know that when they're doing these triggering things, it's really not about you. It's really not. It's really about them and what they have going on. But because it's personal to them, it triggers us, and then it becomes personal for us, and now we're pissed off. And that is not the goal. That's not the end result. This is the same thing when you're at work, when you're on your job or you're in your career, and you have coworkers or other teammates that you have to get along with, and it's just that one Karen. I don't want to say Karen. I'm just joking when I say that, because I'm sure there's a lot of sweet Karens out there, and all of them aren't of one particular race. So I'm not going to say Karen, but there is that one or two coworkers, and they just rub you raw, and you can't help but tell yourself they live to make your life miserable. They go against the grain. They do everything opposite of what you want. But really what it is it could just be that they're hitting your triggers. Maybe one of your triggers is feeling out of control. And so because you can't control them, because you can't micromanage them, because you can't boss them around, then you feel like they are deliberately doing outside of what it is that you need done, when it could simply just be your delivery. And because you have a hard time asking for help, you have a hard time being responsible for people who have their own identity and their own opinions, that triggers you. And so if you're an anxious style attachment person, this means that you're probably overthinking. And what's going to happen is that you're going to be around your peers or your partner or your parents, and you're already going to assume in advance all the negative things that could go wrong. And now it's catastrophic for you, because now you're trying to do damage control for damage that had not even been done. And so whatever comes out of that, you're also taking it personal. So it is now making you irritable. It is making you more aggressive, and you're now becoming the problem. That is not the goal. The goal is to be able to step back, identify, is this a me thing going on right now? Or is this really a overall issue that needs to be handled, that needs to be taken care of? Now, you're not going to necessarily go to everybody and say, hey, I'm an anxious style attachment person, so here's what I got going on with that, and this is how I need you to move. No, that is where you make the adjustments. You do. Your partners, your parents, maybe even your closest family and friends, they may be able to do that adjusting because you're asking, they love you, and they want to make things comfortable for you. But I'm going to tell you now, your coworkers, and church folk, the people out in the street, they could care less what makes you comfortable. So you have to know how to identify with being triggered, what's going to trigger you, and how to avoid being triggered. It's really just that simple. And it's really not that hard because once you know what it said, when you know better, you do better. So once you know what those things are, then you know the situations as they're starting to arise. So now this is where your discernment comes in at. You have to have a spirit of discernment. You have to be in the know. You can't get slapped down with the situation and then try to figure out how to stand back up and become stable because you're a little dizzy at this point. I had a situation with a loved one. Time and time again, we would have great interactions for hours on end, weeks on end, and then it would be that one day. And I never realized that I was hitting a trigger. But the trigger I was hitting was causing that person to respond and hit a trigger for me. And things would go left. Oh, when I tell you, like sometimes I like literally slapped out of thin air, like I'm laughing and smiling, and before I know it, I'm grabbing my stuff and leaving because it just happened that fast. And I just was oblivious to it. Like, what did I say? What did I do? I'm so confused. And then I would hear later on, sometimes months down the line, what the problem was. And I was like, that's not even what I meant. Or that's not even why I did what I did. But because there was no communication and we were just, how I want to say, governed by our triggers, governed by our hurt, governed by the emotional trauma, we weren't able to have a conversation in that moment and find a resolve. Because a lot of times we would have just found out that the whole situation was just misunderstood. And a lot of times when you're dealing with an anxious style attachment person, they're already anxious. They're already a little unnerved. They're already having certain expectations of you. And I won't say that they disappoint or they're disappointed very easily, but they really hold you to your word. They're not like a dismissive, where dismissive is like, yeah, you say you're going to come. You say you're going to show up. You say you're going to be there. I mean, if you're there, you're there. If you're not, you're not. Because wholeheartedly, they want you to stand on your word, but they have very low expectations for what you will or won't do. An anxious attachment style person has more. They are expecting you to say what you mean and mean what you say. They're expecting you to rise to the occasion. So when you are that person and you have those type of expectations for your partner or your friends or your parents or your peers, you have to be able to have a level of grace and say, would this be the end of the world if they don't show up? Would this kill me if they don't call back? Would I be devastated if they can't come through? And why am I putting that much weight on an individual? The only person that can carry a burden like that is God. And we know none of us are him. So you have to, as an anxious attachment style person, be able to create comfortable boundaries for yourself, which means there's a room for give and take. There is that area where you get to say, okay, I was disappointed. I wanted this or I expected that. Have those conversations and then be willing to say better luck next time. You know, it didn't come to fruition. Now, am I saying just let people walk over you and break promises and not honor their word? No, absolutely not. But what I am saying is that don't get so angst about the possibilities, especially creating negative scenarios. You don't want to do that. You want to be able to give the benefit of the doubt, give some grace, and then also be able to give forgiveness. Be able to put your own mind at rest. Be able to self-soothe yourself and not look for that from someone else. Our joy should be within all the time, every time. Anybody else should just be adding to that. Nobody should be stealing it and taking it away. And nobody's responsible for giving. I mean, to be honest, the only person or being I could say is God. God gives us joy, unspeakable joy. I like that. God gives us unspeakable joy. And it is up to us to govern that, to covet that, so that it is not easily taken by someone else. Anxiousness really is a spirit of fear. And what's the analogy they give for fear, or as the acronym? Fear is false evidence appearing real. Have you ever heard that? False evidence appearing real. And what makes the evidence false is the fact that it's in your mind. It has not come to fruition. It has not been executed. It's not past tense. It is still just a thought in the making. That's all it is. And if you are trying to have healthy relationships, but you're living in fear and you're being clingy, and you're living in fear and you're being clingy and you're being aggressive or assertive, it's just not going to go well. So you now have to create and establish boundaries for yourself that says, I am not going to react in this way when this happens. He or she did not call back. It's not the end of the world. I don't have to call them 30 times. I don't have to call down to the police station to see if they're arrested. I don't have to call a hospital to see if they're dead or injured. I can just wait. And when I do hear a response, I can wait for an explanation. And then at that point, you make a decision whether this is someone that you can trust, whether the person is being truthful or being honest. But it's something about being reserved until, what they say, all bets are in. So until you get the full circle of the scenario, of the situation that you're in, why be anxious about it? The Bible says be anxious about nothing. So when it comes to creating boundaries that protect you, a lot of it is going to be in releasing the anxiousness and releasing the control and releasing the uncertainty. Being okay with not knowing you will never know everything. You will never know every time. You will never know every place. You will never know every idea or thought or action or activity. You will never know that. So deal with the information that you have. Be able to make an executive decision on that and move forward. You don't want to waste time or sleep on any of those things. People, places, or things. So if you are interacting with someone who may not know the fullness of you and you need them to understand your triggers, you lead by example. It's like when they say they lead a pig to slaughter, right? You don't lead you to the slaughter. You look down that tunnel and you say, you know what? There's a rifle range on the other end. And if I step outside that tunnel, I might get fired up. So you know what? I'm going to redirect and I'm going to go in a different direction, a safer direction. This is about that discernment again. This is about being able to see things unfold and not necessarily in a negative way, because of course that creates the anxiousness. But what you're identifying is, if I think this is going to be a negative outcome, how do I avoid that? Not how do I sit in it, not how do I just deal with it and take it, but how do I avoid the feeling of that? That's the difference. If I think, let's say I have a partner who's never on time. If I know that to be true, and I know that I have an important event, maybe I make another type of arrangement. That might not be the moment to give the benefit of the doubt, because that's going to drive you crazy. So what you may need to do is just set up a different type of ride, maybe an Uber. Maybe tell that partner, hey, I'm going to meet you there because it's very important that I get there early, and not allow them to guilt you into waiting on them, or that they're going to be there. Sometimes when we have expectations of disappointment, we have to offset that and say, you know what, I know that you would like us to walk in together. I know that we want to go there as a team, but for my peace of mind, for my own sanity, let me just get there and we can work out the details once I'm there. I'll wait. Once you arrive, we can go in together. Does it sound like a lot to do? Not for peace of mind, it isn't. Not at all. Sometimes you just have to do things differently for your own peace of mind because of the emotional trauma, the abandonment, the rejection, the neglect. You have to make decisions early in the onset. And then that prevents you from having negative thoughts. See how one cancels out the other? Before I sit and say my partner's going to be late, I'm going to get there late, I'm going to be upset, they're going to move on without me, I'm going to miss stuff. Before I even hook, line, and sink that, I can say my partner might be late, so let me put some other things in place. I think what I'll do is I'll drive. Maybe I'll catch an Uber. We can ride back together. Hey, I mean, a $20, $30 Uber, that might sound crazy, but it might be well worth it. May also show your partner that, hey, in this moment, I cannot depend on you. And if you have a partner that loves you, they should feel guilty about that. Now, I have a partner who's on time and early for everything. So this definitely isn't speaking of him. But I could definitely say that I once upon a time was not big on time. At least on being on time, right? Nobody want to be so early that nothing is going on or it's just awkward. But I will say, if I had to decide, I think it is more awkward to be late than it is to be early or on time. So I prefer that as I've matured. But be anxious about nothing. There's so much control in life that there are moments where you don't have to have it. You can just coast and just let things unfold, let things unravel on their own. But the things that matter to you, the things that will drive you absolutely crazy, those are the things that you pivot and you set up buffers so that you can digress and not scare people off. So that is my take on how to set boundaries as an anxious style attachment person. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that you subscribed somewhere through this process, especially if you made it to the end and you liked everything that I've said thus far. Make sure that you hit that notification bell because you want to get the updates, when I'm a day late. Sorry about that. Let's make certain that doesn't happen again. But I know my ride's outside. I know they're waiting for me. I know you're ready for me to go home. You're ready to lock up, shower up, get ready for bed. And guess what? I am too. Today has been a long day, but it was nothing short of pleasurable coming over to see you. So thank you so much for having me again. This wraps up another episode of the Hardened Healed Podcast. And you know what I'm going to say. Until next time, bye, loves.